In this video, we're going to talk about creating continuous line embroidery designs, or at very least, learning to manage and minimize jumps using the software. And so to get started, the first thing we're going to do is first of all, I'll just show kind of the basics of how it works. And then we can talk about how you would, use a piece of artwork to create a design such as this one that, notice if I do the slow redraw on this design, perhaps hide the background, that it appears to be all connected together, and as I sort of shade around, you can follow the little black dot that's moving around that shows you that it simply just keeps sewing forward, and drawing the design. And so we call that a continuous line design. In other words, it's not like an artist might sketch where they might pick their pencil up and put it down on a different piece of the paper. I'm trying to sketch in a way that I always keep my pencil down on the paper. Therefore, I don't have any jumps to deal with in the embroidery process. And if you want to take your designs and sew them out on a long arm quilt frame, that becomes even more important, and it will make it even more pleasurable to sew. And just in general, when you can create a design that doesn't have too many trims and jumps, it sews nicer and better at the embroidery machine. And so you can see as I'm talking that the design is sketching out on our screen. I guess I could make it go a little faster, and then it would sketch a little faster for us, and maybe it'll finish it up. But the concept I want to teach today is, how do you make a design that always stays connected like this? And there are several different, parts of the software that can help make that happen for us, as well as there's some sort of logical things that we can understand about. So I'm going to click on pause right now, or if I click on the select tool, it's like saying I'm done with slow redraw, and it takes it right back to the end, shows you all of your design. And just notice that the little black dot represents the current stitch of the design. In other words, that's the end of the design. And so if we click on an empty workspace and we pick up our tool, and I'm going to choose to use the run stitch to begin with, and click, it's a heart. So let's draw. And so I'm going to click to start drawing, draw a line, and click to let go with drawing. And notice the black dot sitting at the end of that line. And so the simplest way to put it is, if you want to make continuous line embroidery, when you start your next line, if you simply start where the black dot is, then you will continue with the same line, and there will therefore be no jump. It is not connecting those lines in any way. You see, I just drew two lines, and notice in the sequence view, if we look closely, there is 1, 2 lines. And that I could draw a third line by just simply clicking and dragging, and there will now be 1, 2, 3 lines. So what appears like one line is really line number 1, line number 2, and line number 3. And if I draw line number 4 by starting over here and going along like this, what happens is line number 4 has a space between where line number 3 ended, and therefore the machine will jump across, and you don't see those jumps unless I turn off 3D, in which case you will as a dotted line. So a dotted line means not stitches, jumps. And it jumps across like that. And so this is kind of how it works. And so if I pick up the run stitch tool again, and I start right where the last one left off, no jumps. If I start in a new location, jumps. Now, there is an option in the software, two particularly, that might help with this. One of them is called Optimize Entry and Exit Points. That's a tool that you could say to the software, hey, maybe you could find a better way. So let's delete all those and draw a line that goes from here to there, and then draw a line that goes from here to there. Now, the software simply went from the last point to the first point that I drew. However, if I select both of those shapes, and I ask the software to optimize the entry and exit point, notice that it was able to find a closer place to connect those two lines. And the way that it did that was by affecting the exit point of the first line and the entry point of the second line. And so the way that you're going to affect those manually is when you select a shape, you have the ability to change from select mode to shape mode. And with shape mode, notice there's a green and red point that represent where it shall start sewing and where it shall finish sewing. And this one shall start sewing there and finish sewing there. So what the software did was it took this shape and it moved its exit point from here to there, and it took this shape's start point from here to there. Does that make sense? And so that's the optimize entry and exit point. Now let's draw this here. Let's go undo. Okay, so we're back to where we were again. And notice my needle point is sitting there. Now, I'm going to go under the preferences of the program. And here it says behavior. And there's an option for generate start stops as drawn. So now that same procedure that I just showed you, which we caused by clicking on a button, will happen as we draw. And you can turn it on and off. And so I have it on right now. Or I had it off right now. Now I'll turn it on. So if I draw a new line, and if I start right here and draw over to there, it will start where I start and stop where I stop. However, if I start over here and I drive the program close to that line and then away from it again, it will automatically learn the closer point to connect this line to that line. So therefore, it learns the start-stop as you draw. And to do that, understand what the software does. Because watch it sew the line along. It's going to walk along my line, and then when it gets to the third line, it will do, did you see how it got here? It walked to this side of the line and then came back along that line to the other side. And so this shape, this line has been drawn in 2 plies on this side and 1 ply on this side. And a lot of quilt feathers are drawn that way. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but the idea here is you get kind of like a 2 plus 1. So if your quilt feather was meant to go kind of like this, and then the next one went like this, and the next one went like this. So it learns, and we can even select all that and have it learn to optimize both the entry and the exit to connect them together. And so the software will stitch along that line, and let's kind of quickly move the slow redraw over to get to there, and do down and along the next one and along the next one. And so that's like typical quilting, and it's all being done by drawing the lines and then letting the software optimize the entry and exit points. So that is kind of what I wanted to make a video about, how to create continuous line embroidery. And so when you have a backdrop, such as the design like this Come As You Are, and it has a photograph, so I just clicked on the backdrop tool to show you that there was actually a photograph that was behind it, and that photograph, I'm just going to move it off to the side, is actually a photograph of somebody's line drawing, which makes it very easy to trace. Now I simply need to zoom in, okay, and I can take my little pen and select a run stitch and then click and drag to draw that line. Okay, the blue is hard to see sometimes, so I choose yellow or red, and then it gives me more contrast when I work. But essentially, so now I'm just going to click on the tool again, and then to keep the connected line, I just start right where I left off. And if you want to do a line twice, go ahead. And, you know, I mean, I'm using a zoom in factor of almost 300%, you guys. So if you miss on screen at 300%, it's like you missed by 1/3 of a millimeter. And see how I'll just stop right there and nudge my screen over to get, you know, the next part that I'm going to sketch lined up. And then I'll pick the pen up right where it left off and keep drawing again. And so that's how you create a continuous line embroidery, and you can decide exactly where your embroidery machine is going to go. And really, guys, it's as easy as that. And so that was a little video about learning to create continuous line, or actually I'm going to not stop here because it's not just about run lines. So let's just say a new workspace that you create a tapered end steel stitch, and then another tapered end steel stitch. Notice how the software learned to make that start-stop as drawn, and so it adjusted the travel points, and that is because we currently have the generate start-stops as drawn turned on. So it's not just for run stitches, it's for all types of fills and everything. If I create a filled-in area, and it will learn that entry point based upon the closest distance to the last stitch's exit point. But you can also select that fill and go on to the shape tool. So it's always the shape tool that you can learn. And if you want to interact with the green entry point and change it, you can. And see how now the traveling, machine traveling sort of path goes to there. And then the exit point, maybe you want to move it to some place that's across the fill so that when the fill sews out, it doesn't stop halfway, walk to the bottom, and sew the other direction. So by working with the entry point and the exit point, not only can you create continuous line embroidery, but you can kind of affect the way the stitching of the machine sews out. In other words, if I have the exit point in the middle like that, notice then when it does this blue fill, that's the underlay. It will start at the top and work its way down to the point that I selected, and then walk to the bottom and work its way back up. But if you select that shape and use the tool called Shape Tool and move that red exit point, for example, down to the bottom, then it'll simply start the fill up here and fill across down to the bottom. And so you'll see the subtle difference in the design this time based upon the entry point and the exit point. And so really that's it. You can learn to interact with the little black dot and learn to interact with entry points and exit points to create designs that have fewer jumps, or perhaps even 0 jumps. So that's it. Once you create your design, as always, you say File and Save As to save it to whatever machine format that you want to use.